Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution? Or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical sexologist Dr. Martha Tara Lee will explore all these and more on Eros Evolution on Om Times Radio.
Hello, and welcome to Eros Evolution, where sexuality and spirituality meets. My name is Dr. Martha Tara Lee. I'm a clinical sexologist based in Singapore, and my company is called Eros Coaching. That's EROS coaching.com. This show explores all about the link between sexuality and spirituality, as mentioned. And it started because for a long time, I had compartmentalized the two as if they were separate. And it wasn't until I started becoming a sexologist that I started hearing people talking about how sexuality and spirituality is one and the same. Sexuality is a part of our being, and our life force energy is sexual energy. So I couldn't really understand, even though I was a sexologist, the link between the two. And really, it was Tantra that made it clear to me. And I wanted to create this show to explore all about the link between the two. In today's show, I will be summarizing the past 14 episodes of Eros Evolution. And this is the third time I'm doing this because I do understand that as we are all very busy, not everybody has the time to listen to every single episode. And I hoped that by doing the summarizing, you will get the gems from each show and then be able to decide whether you want to zoom into a particular show and then listen to it. Also, I wanted to use each of these summaries as a little bit of a milestone for myself to look back at what I have learned from each guest for myself and then reflect on what are the other kinds of shows and guests that I would like to have. Today is a special day because I understand yesterday or maybe even right now for some people in the US because of the time difference that it is Thanksgiving. And as the year unwinds, we start getting into reflecting about our year and then the anticipation of what is to come next year. And also, there was the full moon that just happened where there's the full moon in Gemini. This is a time of really delving into the polarities within us all. When if you are somebody who's very caught up with being busy, this is a time to look at how you can be seeking rest in your life. Or if you're somebody who's very chilled out about life, totally uninspired, this might be a time to look at how to get things going in your life so that there's more excitement. So Gemini brings about polarity. It's a reminder of that in us. And this is a good time as any to reflect about your sexuality and the link with spirituality in today's show. So I'm going to break down the different shows, and each segment, there are 4 segments in every episode of Eros Evolution, and I'm going to try to do 4 to 3 shows per segment. And let's see how that goes. Okay, so starting with episode 32, on the 20th of August, I had Amy Marsh, who talked about how to be a hot and hypnotic lover. She was on the show for the second time. And on the second show, she actually delved into something that was more juicy. She was explaining more about some of the misconception and myths about hypnosis in that previous show that she was on. but in this episode, she was delving more about how hypnosis can be used to enhance our sex life. We actually opened the show talking about a very topical development that had happened. Low sex drive pill was launched for women, and the medical name is phenylbenzarin, and the kind of street name for it is Adina. And basically what this is really something to spark the low sex drive of women. And we were discussing how it really doesn't work. There are lots of side effects that does happen. And we started talking about how hypnosis can actually be better than using pills. And even better than that, affirmations can work just as well, because a lot of our beliefs around our sexuality comes from our thoughts, our beliefs, and then our attitudes. During the show, we talked about the rules of hypnosis and how this affects our subconscious mind. So words like trust, consent, boundaries, being comfortable with using safe words, even hand signals, are all part of negotiating how to bring hypnosis into the bedroom. Rather than think of hypnosis as mind control, it's really about having cooperative boundaries so that you can move on to erotic surrender. Part of mind control can also be associated with fantasy, and it is not really that difficult to bring hypnosis into the bedroom. So the show had my guest Amy Marsh, give lots of tips around that. She also talked about how other things that people can experience in the bedroom, such as being engaged in sensation play, maybe like BDSM, which involves bondage, dominations, and sensation, and then costume play. She brought listeners into a hypnosis script where she helped listeners to focus on relaxing, breathing, feeling the eyelids closing, and then starting to begin the process of feeling erotic sensation in their bodies. So if you're interested in hypnosis, this is an episode that you want to check out. If you want to find an easy way to access all my past episodes, you can just Google Eros Evolution at a glance. So this is the one page on my website that I list every single episode, and you can just scroll down or do Control F and look for this episode, How to Be a Hot and Hypnotic Lover, and you'll be able to get to that link very easily. In episode 33, I had Reverend Goddess Charmaine, and we talked about the holy body. Reverend Goddess Charmaine has a very powerful presence, and you can really sense it in the show. This was a very powerful show because she actually brought us through a few exercises to really start for us all to begin to honor and worship our own body. And it doesn't mean that you need to do this with a partner. You can also be able to do this for yourself. So she talked about the fivefold kiss, where what you do is you talked about blessed are thy, and there are 5 parts of the body, which includes the fingers, the feet, the sex, the heart, and the lips. So what you do is you mention blessed are thy fingers, you kiss your fingers. Blessed are thy feet, you kiss your feet. Knees, sex, hearts, and lips. So by truly honoring every part of your body, you start developing a deeper appreciation for yourself and compassion. She talks about the link between sex and life force energy, which I explore in every episode. And what I liked about what she said was how she learned how to appreciate her body by regarding herself as the personification of God, by calling herself a goddess. And of course, this is she has gone through a lot of training, and she has been initiated into this. She acknowledges Tantra as a unification of sex and spirit. And she also talks about the orgasmic bubble that we can create by connecting with our hearts and our genitals, by creating an altered state of consciousness and use of intention. We can create a sacredness when it comes to this erotic dance that happens. This is it's hard for me to go into the depth of what I learned from Reverend Goddess Charmaine. This was something that moved me very deeply. I would recommend you listen to this show. If you're interested to also hear more about her, she does mention on the show that she has a video called Unifying Sex and Spirit, where she actually shows the fivefold kiss. So it's VIMEO, and you can go into this channel and look for her video Unifying Sex and Spirit, and you'll be able to find it. I had another guest. We talked about the next show, episode 34. I had Mark Michaels and his wife Patricia Johnsons, and they talked about designer relationship. They just launched a book with the same title, and we talked about what it means to navigate different forms of relationship and what monogamy means and what options there are for people who want to open up their relationship without cheating. So we'll talk more about this show after this break.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Live with medium Lisa Phoenix, Mediumship Messages and Musings, explores mediumship and all things metaphysical. Lisa Phoenix invites you to reach above and beyond your everyday experiences, to explore new dimensions in the spirit world. She will do live readings to connect callers to their loved ones in spirit, shares engaging stories and teachings from her own personal experience, and will have intriguing conversations with other mediums, spiritual teachers, and healers to help you understand the metaphysical world so you can connect to these forces in your day-to-day life. Join your host on this magical and metaphysical journey into the world of spirit every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
If you remember living fearlessly, joyfully, and in a world filled with adventure, happiness, pleasure, and unbridled living, then this show is for you. Join me, Dame Nicole Brandon, as I bring you the world's top experts in wealth, creativity, flow, sea-edging technology, space, wellness, health, love, lust, and passion, all merging together each week here at the Hub of Happiness. Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Passionate Living, where you can ride on the magic carpet ride of living and learn how to lead a passionately wild, exciting, and outrageously amazing life.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Simone Milasas would like you to know that business can be fun, which is why she wrote the book, Joy of Business. What if you could have the joy of business rather than the stress and struggle? Most of the time, the only thing stopping you from a thriving business is you. In the Joy of Business book, Simone gives you access consciousness tools and pragmatic ways to get out of your own way and to create the business, life, and living you know is possible and beyond what this reality says is achievable. Business is joy. It's creation. It's generative. It can be the adventure of living. You can purchase your copy of the book through Amazon or Joy of Business website, www.accessjoyofbusiness.com. Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on Om Times Radio.
You're listening to Eros Evolution on the Om Times Radio Network, and you can share the show with your friends by sending them the link omtimes.com/mobile. With this link, your friends will be able to listen to this show without needing to download any app. That's really cool. So today's show, we're exploring the link between sexuality and spirituality in all my previous episodes, in the last 14 episodes that we've had so far. And I was just talking about episode 34, where I had Mark Michaels and Patricia Johnson, his wife, on designer relationship. So this is also the title of their recently launched book, which as far as I understand, has really received very good reviews, and also is one of the popular books in its category. In this designer relationship, it really talks about creating the kind of relationship you want that works for you. Some people do not feel that the monogamous model is for them. And really, when we talk about monogamy, there are really four kinds. So during the show, my guest had talked about these four ways in which monogamy really is in play. There is sexual monogamy, emotional monogamy, social monogamy, and practical monogamy. So sexual, as you know, is whether you choose to be sexually involved with one person or more. And then there's emotional, where you choose to be opening yourself up emotionally. And the next one is socially. So if you are socially monogamous, then your circle of people would be very limited. And then practical monogamy relates more to a living arrangement. There are people who choose to live together and stay together, but may not necessarily be emotionally, sexually, or even socially communicating with each other. During the show, my guest talked about the link between sexuality and spirituality, where they talked about how there is an illusion that is separate, that when we are in an aroused state, we enter a mystical state or even an altered state of consciousness. And they emphasized on the importance of consent when it comes to our sexuality, whether it's by ourselves or with our partners. They also talked about how they met during the show, and they talked about how couples can consciously create a statement of purpose when it comes to the purpose of their relationship, just as we create a mission statement for our lives, or companies have mission statements. We can also be very intentional in creating a statement of purpose for our relationships, the qualities that they want to enhance in the relationship. In episode 35, on September 10, I talked about sexual esteem with Jean Friend Blau. Basically, she is a very seasoned sexual educator, and she also is an established business presenter. So my guest, Jean, was able to navigate between the two worlds. She talks about sexual esteem as one of the things that she really teaches, how it is related to our confidence, our value, and our core sexual goodness, especially relating to our genitals. She introduced the term genital esteem, which is connected with how our genitals look. And when we don't look at our own genitals because we don't like the color and there's shame around it, this does affect our sexuality. So genital esteem is connected to something else, which is body shame, not liking the way we look. So beyond our genitals, there's also shame around our body, often associated with the kind of cultural and media messages we get. The episode with Jean was very good because she also gave several ideas of what we could do to overcome body shame. For instance, she talked about how we have a 12-step program of when we feel sad and lost and abandoned. And likewise, we could, for instance, do mirror witnessing of our own bodies. We could look at our bodies while self-pleasuring, and we could look into our own eyes through the mirrors while we're self-pleasuring. I have done this before myself, and it is highly profound and highly healing. It sounds difficult. It can be challenging, but really if you do it, it really helps to deepen your own connection with your body. She also introduced the term orgasmic meditation, which was by One Taste. It's basically a 15-minute practice where the stroker and the strokee will be engaged in stroking the clitoral shaft. And this is done consciously for 15 minutes with the use of lubricant. And if you're interested, you could purchase the book Slow Sex, which describes the practice orgasmic meditation. So Jean basically recommends this as a practice that can really help us around our genital esteem as well. She also talked about her work in creating cuddle parties, or what she called cuddle sanctuary, and how touch is a part of being able to really practice consent. She talks about how I can't trust your yes if you can't say no. So being able to practice conscious touch will also allow people to start understanding and having greater confidence when it comes to expressing their sexuality. In episode 36, I had Lee Harrington back for the third time. He talks about finding self-love. He shared his own story about how he found self-love, and for him, self-love came about through practicing self-compassion. He introduced 2 questions that we can ask ourselves in developing our own relationship with ourselves. The first one being, how do we as individuals get to know who we are? Or if you reverse it, it would be, how would I get to know who I am? And he basically just started off by getting us to go into asking ourselves, where do I want to go for dinner? What kind of artwork do I like? By asking ourselves questions, we start to delve deeper into who we really are as individuals. And then, once we start having such a relationship, we can ask ourselves, who do I want to be as a spiritual person? And an even bigger question would be, what's my quest? What kind of work do I want to do in this world? As we start asking ourselves these questions repeatedly, we start delving into the kind of life we want to have. So these are basic, to him it's basic stepping stones to asking even bigger questions about the kind of spiritual being that we want to be in this world. He talks about compassion. He talks about the metta prayer that we could give to ourselves, and how the link between compassion relates to later being able to forgive yourself so that you can create greater peace, happiness, and safety. He talks about the link between surviving and thriving, and he went on to talk about more about the link between self-love, spirituality, sexuality, and how we can explore sensuality, sensation in our bodies. So there's a lot of love that comes forth in this show. If self-love is something that you would like to delve into, then this episode 36 would be something you want to look at. In the next episode that I had, which is episode 37, it was called Embodying Emotional Liberation with Joanne Amir. Joanne Amir is a educator, and she's very much into flower essence. So she talks about how flower essence are basically biotechnical medicine, and they work on emotional freedom in a subtle, energetic level. So by tapping into the vibration and spirit of flowers and trees, we would be able to help release the true essence of who we are really meant to be. And she talks about how flower essences can be used for all kinds of emotional healing, and what she advised her clients to use depends on what exactly their issues are. And it's not just the same for everybody. Say, for instance, if they've gone through sexual abuse, it really depends on the individual. So a consultation would definitely be in order. During the show, we talked about how she uses other kinds of healings, for instance, with stones, and she talks about how the moon energy, which is more related to feminine energy, and the sun energy, which is related to more masculine energy and of showing off, whereas the moon energy is more of going through like quality of phases. So more after this break.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Looking for inspiration?
Want to be inspired?
Not sure where to go?
Find Mark and Kim every Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Inspired Living.
Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual.
Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Have you been searching for a perspective beyond the mainstream? Check it out. Join your hosts Cielito Pascual and Diana Gold Holland on Share International Radio for thought-provoking views behind the news, Sundays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio. You can also find us at shareontheairradio.org. This may be the message of hope you've been waiting for.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. Om Times Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single Om Times endeavor. Host your show with Om Times Radio Network. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. The cutting edge of conscious radio. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back to Eros Evolution. In this show, I'm summarizing the last 14 episodes of Eros Evolution, and we're moving on to episode 38, where I talked about vaginismus. So in this episode, I didn't have any guests, and I talked about vaginismus, a virgin's curse, ? And vaginismus is a condition that happens when a woman's vagina shuts down, making penetration difficult or impossible. So usually it is in anticipation of pain or fear of pain. So most of the time, working with clients who have vaginismus, it's usually due to lack of sex education, lack of awareness and connection with their bodies and with sexuality. And in a nutshell, these women have a phobia towards penetrative sex. And so this is actually the number one reason why people come to me. And I have often talked about it in the media. However, this was the first time that I actually talked about all the things that I wanted to talk about vaginismus, the way I wanted to talk about it without having somebody interviewing me. So during the show, I talked about what is vaginismus, first of all, and then I talked about some common myths around vaginismus and common responses from people when they first learn about having this condition. So for instance, for women, why me? For men, they start to blame themselves. And during the show, I also talked about what usually happens when they go to other kinds of helping professionals, such as going to a gynae, a psychologist, thinking that hypnosis will help. So I shared with listeners during the show of my personal experiences working with clients with vaginismus, and also what I would recommend as some of the steps moving forward for people who have this condition. For those of you who are thinking, okay, why am I listening to Martha talking about vaginismus? Well, 1 in 10 women have vaginismus around the world. So that's a global statistic that I have come across. 1 in 10 women have it. And a lot of women that are in Asia seem to have it more, maybe because of lack of sex education. So actually, this is what I even consider an epidemic within Asia. So maybe you may know somebody who have vaginismus but don't know the name. Without knowing the term, it's very difficult to seek help, because it is a phenomenon that happens when they are going to try to have sex and then they just start tensing up and feeling stuck in their bodies and really being very baffled. So not knowing the term really is quite disempowering, because without knowing what it is, they won't be able to seek help. So the more people know about it, even if you don't have this condition, it allows you to be a little bit more aware and empathetic to people who suddenly become very quiet or defensive when it comes towards questions like, so when are you planning to have a baby? Or they've been single for a long time, they've been together for a long time, but they don't seem to be having a good marriage. So these may be some telltale signs of when someone may have vaginismus, may have some difficulties around sex. And as compassionate people, by understanding more about this condition, we might even be able to start talking about it with people in our lives. In the next episode 39, the title was, "This One is for the Men." So having talked about vaginismus, which is very much a woman's issue, I then moved on to talking about men's issue. However, I didn't just talk about a particular men's issue. I talked about the 3 most common issues that men face, and they were premature ejaculation, erectile difficulties, delayed ejaculation, and low sex drive. So during the show, I explained what each of these mean and what men could do in general, and what solutions and what advice I usually give in my work as a sexologist. So one of the things that is a all-round good practice that both men and women can do that helps with our sexuality is Kegels. So during the show, I explain what Kegels is, and I'm going to explain about what Kegels is briefly here. So Kegels is an exercise you do when you're trying to stop yourself from peeing. So when you feel like you need the bathroom but you can't find a toilet anywhere nearby, so what we tend to do is we tend to clench our pelvic floor muscles. So this act of tensing and then relaxing is Kegels. So being able to do repetitions of it even when you don't feel like peeing. So when you don't feel like it, you don't have this pee bearing down on your bladder. So you can actually just remember how that movement feels like and just do that as a exercise separate from the need for using the toilet. So just squeeze and let go, squeeze and let go. So that by itself is an exercise very much focusing on our pelvic floor muscles. And our pelvic floor is essentially the floor of the house. So if you have a building, the foundation is just as important as the rest of the structure. So we spend a lot of time focusing on the way we look, on our makeup, on toning, moisturizing our face. However, the foundation of the building, our pelvic floor muscles, actually supports the rest of the structure, rest of our bodies. And having a strong pelvic floor muscles really helps with being able to feel sensation in our genitals, being able to then be able to have easier orgasms. And for men, it is very much correlated with having ejaculation and erection control and strength. So during the show, I did mention about my online training program called Ready Get Sex Go, which helps men with premature ejaculation. However, men who just want to have better erection or ejaculation control will also be able to benefit from this program. So if you are interested to find out more about what program I offer, you can go to this website, Eros Coaching, that's EROScoaching.com/RGSG free. So RGSG free, Ready Get Sex Go free. Basically, it explains more about premature ejaculation and what men can do about it. So I have 3 free videos, and then there's the option of signing up to the program. In episode 40, I had my colleague and ex-schoolmate, Dr. Tanjanika Kuskut. She talked about sex as currency. So this was very interesting for me because if you have a good relationship with sex, maybe you don't have a good relationship with money, or maybe you have a better relationship with money than you have with sex. So what if we treated sex as if it was a currency? So if you had more comfort and ease with your sexuality, that would make you show up in the world in a different way. You would look actually more powerful. And that by itself is a very powerful currency that we can have to offer the world. So this was a very interesting paradigm that she introduced to me in understanding how our sexuality is a form of power, and this power can be understood by treating this as some kind of investment into ourselves and in the kind of wealth and abundance that we can create in our lives. So she talked about how you could actually start increasing your sexual currency. She talked about first of all, taking personal responsibility instead of having a victim mentality. The first step, even realizing that you have the power, can often provoke change to begin happening. The second thing she talked about is how, besides taking responsibility, we can move on to then reclaiming and feeling empowered about it. Empowered meaning that we assume the power that we always have had in us and taking accountability of our sexuality versus this is something that just happens to us. Some people do things to us. From there, being able to take personal responsibility and reclaiming and feeling empowered in your sexuality will be linked to our growth and our evolution as people. She talks also about how sex as currency relates to relationships and how cultural norms affects the kind of messages and the behaviors that we put out in our lives. For instance, some people treat sex, withhold sex as a form of punishment. And she actually suggests that it's like you're slapping yourself to slap other people. You're hurting yourself when you withhold sex as a form of punishment. And to her, it's a form of insanity. So I really love this show, and there were a few takeaways in that show. You do want to listen to this show because Dr. Tanika Kuskut is a sexologist like myself, and she really has developed this as a paradigm to educate people. And that's episode 40. In episode 41, I had Rebecca Lauren talk about empowering your erection. So this is very much a show for the men, and she focuses on the erection. And as we know, erection is very much linked to a male's sexuality, and actually also is linked to their sense of their own power and strength as a man. So when men have issues with their erection, they definitely don't feel very good about themselves, and they don't feel good about the way they show up in the world. So Rebecca actually has worked with, I believe, like at least 1,000 men directly with their erections. She does do body work, and she has come out with an online program which includes 4 different audios. So during the show, she talked about her program and how she helps men with their erections through her online program. So they include 4 audios, including asking questions of what actually is going on. Then the second one is a guided energy clearing system. The third one is a physical clearing that she teaches men. And then the fourth one is a nurturing self-love meditation. So that's episode 41. You want to check that out. So more after this break.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome to The Gathering Around My Kitchen Table on Equilarium FM, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join my guests as we integrate spirituality into everyday reality with vibrant conversations, inspired interviews, and my latest channeled guidance to inspire and brighten your day. I'm Claire Johnson, and together we'll be raising vibrations across the nations.
What if living didn't have to be so serious?
What if you could move beyond your problems with greater confidence and ease than you've ever imagined?
Throw your labels out the window and join the Irreverent Therapist for practical tips and a very different way of approaching the changes you would like to create.
Marilyn Bradford
and Pam Hodling
have empowered hundreds of people to come out of self-judgment, quit looking to experts, and begin to create the lives they desire.
Join us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Irreverent Therapist Show.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake. Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back to Eros Evolution. We are summarizing the past 14 episodes, and we are now going into episode 42, which is the 11th show that I have to talk about. And in this show, I talked about sex with Tamari, and it is basically called edutainment. So she introduced the word edutainment, which means being able to entertain while educating. And she's a new breed of sexologist that's coming forward. She is actually very established and accomplished in I can't remember where she's at. She does teach at Widener, and she talks very much about the body because she is also a performer and dancer. So she talked about how our body is a form of expression, and she uses that as a form of activism, because if we are not comfortable with our bodies, it can actually repress us and make us feel as if we are kind of like stuck. So she recommends people who want to become more comfortable with their bodies to first acknowledge the importance and then practice. So for instance, movement, dance, doing workout, all helps us to become more comfortable and more present with our bodies. She also explains what sex positive means in the show, which essentially means first understanding that sex is a natural, innate part of being human. Sex is a renewable resource in us, that everybody has a good body, that we are all responsible for our own enthusiastic consent, the big yes, that being sex positive means acknowledging that our relationship with our bodies and with our sexuality is an ongoing process that involves collaborative communication with ourselves, with our partners, and also how we value our partners. Being sex positive also means being conscious about the kind of messages that we receive as children and the kind of messages that we are giving to children. So during the show, she talks about some of the fears that we have when it comes to expressing our sexuality, how we have difficulties with saying no, how we have fear of being weird, and how we live essentially in a sex negative world. She talks about how she views the link between sexuality and spirituality. For herself, she asks herself when she's engaged in sex whether she is checking out. When she's checking out, it means maybe she's getting distracted, or she's in her head, or she's thinking about something else. She's not truly present in her body. That to her affects her sexual connection with her partner. So it's very interesting that I have different guests coming onto the show. Some of them are more spiritual than others, and all of them are giving different interpretations of what they feel being spiritual means when it comes to their sexuality. So here we have somebody who's very comfortable with her body saying that being spiritual with sexuality means being present. And that by itself is very, very profound, because we sometimes get caught up in our heads like, oh, it's very difficult. And coming from a sex educator, this can be as simple as being present in her body. She introduced the term intersexuality as well, which means being respectful of different views and different kinds of expression and the range of experiences that people need to be reached, and being very clear that not having labels can be very empowering. So intersexuality means this movement that she believes is starting to happen, where people are getting less caught up with labels and really seeing everything around sexuality as being more fluid. So if you're interested to have a more open, broadened perspective of sexuality, you do want to listen to some of my colleagues who are sexuality educators, being episode 42, Sex with Tamari, Sexual Esteem with Jean French Blau in episode 35, and also then episode 34, Embodying Emotional Liberation with Joanne Amia. So in episode 43, I had my friend coming back for the second time, I believe, and she talked about sex. So how do we talk about sex? So this is more about sexual communication. So Laura Doe, my friend, is also a parent. She's an educator, and She is the vulva queen. So earlier this year, she came out with the Art and Science of Female Arousal. This is a DVD that she came out with, beautiful DVD, and talks all about the female anatomy. And in this show, we were talking about sexual communication. She talks about why it is important to talk about sex in the first place. If we don't talk about sex, we don't get to figure out, for the most part, what we like and don't like about sex. When we don't talk about sex, there's this veil around it, and it actually becomes this elephant in the room. She gives a lot of suggestions on what people can do when it comes to talking about sex, not just as parents, but also as adults. So the first thing when it comes to parents is to first learn how to be accurate, getting the information for yourself, being age appropriate, being very clear what exactly your child is asking you, and be guided by your child's interests. So if they're not interested at all when it comes to sex before 10, this is when the parent should try to bring it up in some form, whether it's form of video. So for instance, being able to relate it to, say, some kind of video that you watch about animals in the animal kingdom, and then relate it back to how human beings also have sex, to start the ball rolling. So very good advice from her, being accurate, being age appropriate, giving them information that can be simple one-sentence answers for a start, and allowing the child to know that this is an ongoing conversation that they can have, and also to be guided by their interests. So if they're curious, they ask, you answer. So it doesn't have to be this big talk that you have with a child. The other thing that she advises parents to be able to do is to encourage their kids to tune into their natural world, tune into the cyclical nature of seasons, the earth, the moon, and how our body goes through changes as well. Being able for them to interact with themselves will allow them to later on be able to interact with their partners. The second thing that she also talked about is actually teaching their children how to be respectful and appreciative of their body and how their body supports them. Very, very good advice from Laura Doe. As adults, however, we can also practice overcoming our feelings of embarrassment in talking about sex and the taboos around it by practicing, for instance, with our friends. So asking for permission and saying, "May I practice with you?" can be really great. Another thing that we could do to become more comfortable with sexuality or sex talk is journal. Journal with ourselves, get clear within ourselves first before we actually even talk about it with our partners. So this is especially good for people who may not feel comfortable talking about sex or come from a sexually repressed environment, and therefore they don't know anybody that they could practice with. So as you can begin to see, there's a lot of richness in my episode with Laura Doe in episode 43, which actually took place on the 5th of November. So once again, if you want to find all my episodes, you can actually do a Google, Eros Evolution at a Glance. This is where I list every single episode, and from there you can get a very easy hyperlink to every single episode that I have had on this show. Episode 44 is really kind of like, oops. What happened was both me and my guests were online and we were ready to go, but there were some technical difficulties. So episode 44 never really took place. There was no show for episode 44. And we were going to talk about bringing sex positivity to Poland. And my friend Dr. Agata Lowin, she wanted to talk about in this show sex positivity and how she has started through her work, through her organization, started to create a real shift in Poland, including talking about BDSM. So I'm getting her back on December 10th. So she will be back on December 10th, and we will try for the second time to record the show. So do tune in to this episode, which didn't take place, but will be taking place on December 10th. On November 19th, and this was last week, we talked about the world of sexuality education. This was when I had Bill with me, and he is the executive director for the Center of Sex Education. So they are having a conference called the National Sex Education Conference, and he talked about the conference and what people can expect during the show, and he talked about how important sexuality education is, which by this time I hope all of us know how important it is. And he shared some of his personal stories and successes with the conference, and also how he had some not so good messages of sex education growing up, but the intention behind it was one of compassion, actually. He also gave a freebie in this show, how listeners would be able to download a free ebook on how I got into sex ed. So if you want this show, then do tune in. So we're running out of time, and this has been Dr. Martha Tara Lee of Eros Evolution. Tune in next week, and I've just summarized all 14 episodes. I hope you will go back and listen to all the shows. And have a good week. Happy Thanksgiving, and see you next week.